This podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice or mental health care. Please seek help from a trusted counselor or call or text 988 if you are in crisis.
Welcome to All Start, where we share our story, listen with compassion, and connect through our faith and mental health experiences. Following the story, Morgan and I will offer insights that connect faith and mental health. We invite you to practice listening and understanding during this episode so that when someone shares their story with you in real time, you'll be ready. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's start this journey together.
My name's Daniel, and I'll start. My biggest fear in telling my story is being rejected, feeling isolated, reliving trauma that made me feel like I was a failure and I wouldn't be enough. I've spent most of my life feeling like I wasn't enough or I didn't meet the bar. When I was younger, I was like a C student in school. I just kind of got through. But I had a brother who was an A student in school. And there was just this constant feeling of comparison. And that's hard when you're young. It's hard at any age, but that certainly became kind of an awareness early on that, like, there is a comparison made, and being not enough or disappointing someone because of my output or because of what I was or wasn't, was hard, is hard. I was very fortunate that my family was super helpful in my mental health journey. My mom was always, even now, is still so receptive to anything that we're going through and is always willing to talk about it. And early on, my mom said to me, Daniel, this is a part of your story. This is a part of who you are. It's about turning your mess into your message. And I've never been super closed off. I've always worn my emotions on my sleeve, for better or for worse. And I've never wanted someone to feel like they couldn't ask me anything, or like there were, conversation points that were off limits. No one grows when we stay closed off. And I have always wanted to be there for someone, for anyone. And so I have always been willing to just talk about my struggles. They have taken a lot of shape over the years, with anxiety and depression and dealing with ADHD and the things that come along with all of those ideas in the mix. I never wanted someone who was going through any of those things that I also went through to feel like they couldn't ask me about them. And so that's what keeps me wanting to have a dialogue. The first time in my life that I experienced a mental health challenge, I had just moved to the area. I spent half of my life in the suburbs of Chicago. I was 14 years old, moving back to the greater central Illinois area, from a town of 100,000 plus people to a town of 7,000. And as a young city slicker, I looked a little out of place. And when I started school in my new city, I started getting violently ill every single day getting ready to go to school. I didn't really know what it was. I figured it wasn't a 3-week flu, but every day I would be just painfully nauseous and eventually getting sick. At school, I was the new kid. I was a freshman in high school, going to school with a bunch of people who had all spent their entire life going to the same school with the same kids, the same everything. And being the new guy ultimately led to being the different guy, which led to bullying and, mean things from my classmates and peers. And it was hard. And it was a lot to walk through. Through that year, I'd, make friends and find my way more or less. I had friends at church on Sundays that were lovely and certainly lightened the load. But those initial experiences at 14 certainly left a lasting impact on the rest of my life. I can still remember the visceral just pain, the knots in my stomach, if I think hard enough about that time in my life. And it certainly gave me the hindsight to see that there was a mental health struggle early. It's not so isolated. At the end of that year, I decided I wanted to go back to Christian school. That was my upbringing. I had spent every year, with the exception of my freshman year, in private Christian school, and I wanted to get back to that. I was excited for the opportunity to grow in my faith at school. My junior year of high school, everything changed. And I'll never forget, on my 17th birthday, I had a party at my house, and all of my friends came over and hung out, and I finished the night sitting on the couch talking to my mom, and I told her I was struggling with, these feelings of rejection, and I just wanted something to be different. And I told my mom that there were days that on my drive to school, I just wanted to crash my car. And it was just in an effort to make things different. I didn't actually want to be hurt or smash my car up or any of those things, hurt anybody else in the process. But I just thought it would make things different, and different was going to be better. And the next week, I was in a doctor's office talking to a doctor about how hopeless I feel. And do you ever just feel like you don't know why you're sad, but you're sad? I was feeling like having cloudy, hazy days for 3-4 days a week at times. And that was what started me on a path for treatment with medication and trying to get to the bottom of that depression, that deep-seated pain that I didn't understand. After the depression diagnosis, I started taking medication to treat the depression and anxiety, and it was night and day. And so it was super effective. I had a very good experience taking medication for my depression. It certainly changed my life at the time. the battle with depression would continue. And I still battled daily with feeling inadequate, feeling like I wasn't enough, regardless of how hard I had worked or what I was working on or what my GPA was, the metrics of success that we can point to. And in the back of my mind, I always had this battle of maybe this is just who I'm gonna be. I'm just gonna rock steady here, be okay, but not much more than that. I knew that I needed to talk to someone. There were things wrong that I needed help with, help understanding, help navigating. But I also really hated myself in the mix. And I would say nasty, hurtful things about myself, and that was my reality. Self-deprecation just was part of the daily vernacular. It felt like this was my reality, and I wasn't doing anything but living in that. And so I connected with a wonderful counselor who helped me navigate so many of these really deep-seated pains, and reminded me along the way that not only are these things not true, you're not an amalgamation of these traits that you think you have, but they're not biblical either. You are not the list that you check off. You are always still a child of God. After about a year of working with a counselor on managing the day-to-day of depression, I really felt like it was managed. It wasn't cured. It was still something I dealt with, but it was managed. Things were going well. I had met my wife. I was still working on my bachelor's program. School was going well. I felt like I was really doing okay. And I stopped taking my medication for depression. This was a tumultuous time after, while my body tried to normalize again for the first time in 5 years. I kept walking through my bachelor's program at school, kind of doing the same thing. I wasn't taking medication anymore, and I was all in on school. I had these things hanging on my shoulder, always feeling like I had been told I wasn't enough and I wasn't gonna perform enough, making me feel like I had something to prove. And I did exactly that. I spent the next 2 years in college just doing everything I could to perform to the best of my abilities, and that wasn't always managed in the healthiest of ways. I was certainly stressed and overwhelmed all of the time, but I found that I needed to make lists and then make more lists to help try and stay on top of these things, my assignments, my day-to-day life, my work. And after I graduated, I went on to work in consulting in what I had gotten my degree in. And I had just found that, I had these patterns that I remembered from being in college of, I don't understand why I can't understand, why I'm not taking in the material the same way my classmates were. And then now that I'm in the workforce, I'm doing continuing education, trying to understand what the information I'm taking in. And in this time, I started working with a counselor again, to talk through what this was. I just didn't understand why, regardless of how bad I wanted to be good at what I did, I wanted to be educated, I wanted to understand, I just couldn't understand. And after a year of working through that, we realized that I had ADHD. I ended up connecting with a doctor who diagnosed me with ADHD and started treating that with medication that totally and completely changed my life. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was meeting the potential that I had. I felt like I didn't understand before why I would want something so bad internally, but not quite be able to get myself to do that thing. And after getting treatment for ADHD, it felt like for the first time I could do all of those things. I could read the book. I could take in the information. I could act on what I had learned an hour later. I had the focus. I had the depth. People think ADHD looks one way, and oh my goodness, is it just so many different presenting symptoms, or you don't try hard enough, you don't want it bad enough, and it is crushing knowing that that's the experience or the understanding or the stigma. But those skills I had to learn, those coping mechanisms I had to learn when I was in college to deal with learning so that I could perform how I needed to for a test, for an assignment. Those are all valuable tools that I have in my back pocket. I just am also capable now because I'm treated for ADHD. I had cloudy days where I just couldn't hardly get myself to do anything. I just was beat. I was sad. I was depressed. And I couldn't get around it. My value was placed at the amount of things that I crossed off my list for the day. Every day. And on days that you don't cross everything off your list, or anything off of a list, or you're not quite sure why you couldn't make the list that day, you just feel like a failure. I just felt like a failure. And I already felt like a failure. And so it became like salt in the wounds of, I want this so bad. I want to achieve. I want to do good work. I just don't know why I can't. Dealing with depression and anxiety and ADHD, ultimately, I had to find ways to deal with those things. At times it was journaling about what I was feeling and going through, and praying, but spending time engaging with God, doing devotionals, praying, reading. And then ultimately, I fell madly in love with running, and have spent the last 5 years of my life really committed to pursuing goals of mine there. Having an extra source, an outlet, having an extra outlet to spend energy and just time to think, time to reflect, time to work on all the other things while you're exerting energy. It was a truly life-changing experience for me, physically, mentally, on all counts. So if you're struggling to understand your diagnosis, or maybe it's not a diagnosis even, you're just trying to understand your anxiety, your depression, your ADHD, these things that you don't understand. I want you to know that it's worth connecting with the people around you. Mental health it feels isolating because there's maybe not a presenting symptom. And that makes it really hard to spot when someone you know is going through something. And if you're going through that, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to the people around you. Because you're not as alone as you think you are. You're loved, you're valued, you're cared for, you're a child of God. And the people around you want you. It's painful feeling like you're not enough for the people around you. But know that you are enough. You are more than the list you check off. You're more than the amount of money that you make in a year. You're more than the amount of followers you have on Instagram, the likes you get on Facebook. It's not about the metrics that we want to have. Your value is eternal and far beyond any of those.
Welcome back to the post-story discussion of I'll Start. Thank you for listening to Daniel share his story and for sticking around to reflect with us today. If you're new here, this is the part of each episode where we slow things down and unpack what we just heard. And I bring the mental health lens, and Morgan offers a faith perspective because at I'll Start, we believe that growth happens when those two things are in conversation with each other. Let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Heather Kalapek, and I'm here with my co-host, Morgan Arsenault.
Hey everyone, thanks again for being here. Heather is right. Our hope here is simple. We want to break stigma, build community, and remind you that wherever you are at in your journey, that you are not alone.
So let's dive in. Daniel's story is layered. But I think one theme that kept coming up for me was this belief, I'm not enough. Mm-hmm. And that belief shows up really early for him through comparison and bullying and just feeling different than other people. And it follows him then into adulthood through school and work and even how he measured his own worth. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to name that belief out loud because so many people carry it quietly. That belief that I'm just not enough, and without realizing how much it shapes their anxiety and their choices and their exhaustion.
Yes. And what stood out to me is actually something that was similar from your episode that stood out to me. And it's just the power of words and how words spoken to us, especially when we're younger, they can create this filter and just shape who we are. And they just stay and stay for so long.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. And I think for naming it, you know, for Daniel, for me, For our listeners who were also shaped by words at a young age, Daniel, in his story, he moved from a large city to a small town, and being different, being singled out, those experiences, they didn't just hurt in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
They planted something.
Yes. And scripture is so clear about the power of words. In Proverbs 15, verse 4, it says, "Gentle words bring life and health. A deceitful tongue crushes the spirit." And man, those harmful words, they just took root early for Daniel. And that belief of not being enough, not measuring up, they just only grew stronger as he grew.
Yeah, and I think then once that not enough belief takes root, it becomes that filter.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes the filter by which you view everything, your grades, your productivity, your performance, relationships, everything gets interpreted through that lens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I also think we have to talk about one of the most clinical moments in Daniel's story, and that's his ADHD diagnosis. And not because, suddenly having that diagnosis fixed everything, but because it reframed the story that he was telling himself.
Mm-hmm.
For years, he believed, I'm not trying hard enough, and I'm failing, I'm falling short, I'm not good enough. When in reality, his brain was simply working differently and it wasn't supported.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that distinction matters so much. ADHD, it's not this character flaw or laziness. It's not a lack of intelligence, and it's not a lack of effort. And while that diagnosis didn't suddenly fix everything, I think it certainly gave an understanding of maybe why or what was going on.
I imagine it would have been a huge relief to know, there's no more excuses now. It's like, this is the explanation. This is why.
Exactly. And, I see that all the time as a therapist. When someone finally has language for what they're experiencing, shame that you've carried for so long, it starts to loosen its grip.
Mm-hmm.
And don't mishear what I'm saying. Daniel didn't suddenly become more valuable when he got a diagnosis. He already was.
Mm-hmm.
But understanding why things were hard, they allowed him to stop disliking himself for who he is. Another thing I really want listeners to notice is how many healthy coping mechanisms and coping skills that Daniel developed over time. One of them was he sought therapy. And another was, he used medication responsibly. Mm-hmm. He learned, systems that worked for his brain. He found movement through running, which helped regulate his body and his mind. He stayed connected to people instead of isolating. And all those things, they're not easy. And a lot of them come with trial and error, if you think about that. So really, those things, their resilience and their growth over a long period of time. And that's something really to be proud of.
Absolutely. And there's so much wisdom in that as well. Learning to just, recognize what helps you function and going with it, right? Honoring it instead of fighting against it and, beating your head against the wall.
Yeah. And I want to say it so clearly. Needing support does not mean that you are weak. It means that you're finally paying attention to the right things. I was recently at a conference where psychiatrist and ADHD expert, his name is Dr. John Coonley, he shared this metaphor, and it really stuck with me. He compared ADHD treatment to that of vision impairment. And this was fascinating to me.
That's so good.
Here's how he described it and how he compared them. He said, both ADHD and vision impairment have nothing to do with intelligence or IQ. Both are often genetic and they develop early. Both affect a person's ability to focus.
So good.
I know. And then he said, someone with vision impairment can squint and, they can manage for a short period of time. I think anybody who wears glasses, you take those off and you're like, okay, if I squint really hard, I can make this out, right? So for a short period of time, that will work. But eventually, your eyes strain and you burn out and you struggle. And so glasses, they don't give someone an advantage. They allow them to function as intended. And I think that ADHD medication and support, they can work in much the same way. It's not about changing who someone is, it's about giving their brain the support it needs to focus and function well.
Absolutely.
And there's so much stigma around that. And I felt it too in my own story with having an ADHD diagnosis. But, both glasses and medication, they require a doctor to find the right diagnosis and prescription. And both are tools. They're not shortcuts.
Right.
And like I said, there's so much stigma around that diagnosis and around treatment. And so as someone with this diagnosis myself, I was sitting there listening to Dr. Coonley's metaphor, and it just felt so freeing. And it helped loosen the shame that, I have carried, that I'm sure Daniel carries, that many of us carry for a long time. And I hope that it loosens some of that shame in the same way for someone who's listening today.
Absolutely. That's so good.
I know.
That's so good.
It was I've never thought about it that way, but he was like, anyway, explaining through that. I was just taking notes, and he was like, let me just explain it this way. Because even in a room full of therapists, people were like, is medication? And he was like, let me explain how it's different.
To all of you out there wearing glasses.
Yes,
let me
he
tell
was
you how
like,
it
take
is.
your glasses off.
Yes.
We're asking you, he is exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. And it was just really great. He was like, can you focus? What's wrong? Because parents will come in and they'll be like, well, they can focus really well though for a period of time, actually really focused in. And then you're like, yeah, but after a while they're exhausted and they can't keep it up and they can't. And that's what you see is the burnout and the frustration. And because you don't have your glasses. So I went home and I told Matt that story. You can cut all this out, but I'm just telling Morgan because I think it's funny. I went home and I was telling Matt this metaphor, and he was like, so now he will say to me, are you wearing your glasses? And I'd be like, no. What? What are you trying to say? It's just really funny. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. I should probably go do that. So
oh my goodness.
it's just really funny.
And
So
it's just so, the
Is there stigma
relatability. I get it.
Yeah. Is there stigma with putting glasses on and going to the doctor and being like, what prescription do I need to help me see? No, it's giving your brain and your body what it needs. And it has nothing to do with intelligence or IQ or any of those things. It's your ability to focus. So
well said, Dr. Coonley. Mm-hmm. One of the things that stood out to me in Daniel's story is how his inner narrative began to change over time. It wasn't overnight and it wasn't done perfectly, but gradually truth began to uproot some of those lies that he had been carrying for so long. And, that is what happens when we fill our mind with truth. And it reminds me of Philippians 4, verse 8 says this, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I love this verse because one, it is straightforward, but also it does not deny the reality or pain of a situation, right? It's an invitation just to be intentional about where we place our attention. And it's just, it's the renewing of our minds.
And I think what's fascinating is how closely that aligns with what we know from neuroscience. Now, our brains are constantly forming and strengthening pathways based on repetition. The thoughts that we return to the most often become the easiest ones for our brains to access. And that's not about willpower, it's about wiring. And so when Daniel spent years rehearsing the belief, I'm not enough, his brain got really good at going there. And that pathway then became familiar. It became automatic, and it's incredibly convincing.
Man, that makes a lot of sense, and so it's not like pretending everything is good. It's about choosing what we practice and what we focus on and what we think about.
Exactly. Reframing isn't lying to yourself. It's not toxic positivity where you're trying to convince yourself that everything is great. And it's not about ignoring what hurts. It's recognizing the old patterns that you have and the thoughts that you have, and intentionally strengthening new pathways by repeating and returning to what is true. Scripture can be an anchor to those truths when we get stuck in old patterns. So over time, then those new pathways begin to compete with the old ones. So Daniel didn't just hear truth once and then suddenly feel better and believe it. He practiced it through therapy, through support, through naming what was actually happening in his brain, and through practicing his faith.
Yeah, the practice and the repetition is huge. And when Scripture invites us to think about such things, that is the practice, right? It's one that shapes us over time, and it will change everything.
It will. It will change everything. Because that's how rewiring happens. It's small, repeated shifts in attention. Truth spoken again and again over time. And the new experiences, they reinforce a different story. Over time, the brain learns this is safe, this is possible, this is true.
And that truth isn't something we make up. It is something that we return to. And as followers of Jesus, this truth is from Scripture. And I hope it's encouraging to you because it's fascinating to me, the science behind it, and how that science and study supports what is already written in Scripture.
Exactly. They're not competing. They go hand in hand. And that's what this is all about. And, Daniel's story, it's such a good reminder that change doesn't come from just trying harder, working harder, over-functioning, but from practicing truth consistently and with the right support.
So maybe the reflection for today flows right out of that idea. If the brain is shaped by the stories we return to, and if faith invites us to practice what is true, then this becomes a gentle but important question for our listeners. What story have you been telling yourself about your worth?
Ooh. And I'd add this, is it possible that the struggle that you're facing isn't a personal flaw, but a signal? A signal that you need something. Maybe it's support. Maybe it's compassion toward yourself. Because so often we interpret struggle as personal failure, yet how we're struggling is often important information about what we need, not about who we are.
That's so good. Colossians 2:10 says, "You are complete through your union with Christ." And that is not something that you earn or you prove or perform your way into. So let's name what does not define you. You are not defined by what others say about you. You are not defined by your productivity or any performance. And you are not defined by a diagnosis. You are defined by the one who made you.
And that truth, it gives us permission to breathe. So stop fighting yourself. Learn what actually works for you. You're allowed to need help. You're allowed to take medication. You're allowed to ask ask questions, and you're allowed to grow at your own pace. Healing isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more secure in who you already are.
Guys, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of All Start. If Daniel's story resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it today. And please be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube so we can keep building connection and hope, one story at a time.